Hi, my name is Ashley.
And my name is Lucia, and welcome back to another episode of the 76 Cents Pod.
In this week's episode, we are kind of revisiting an episode that we previously made on the East Asian American experience, but we decided with the rise of anti-Asian Pacific Islander hate recently that we wanted to revisit the topic of anti-Asian hate.
Yeah, and so if you didn't know, I mean, you probably did hear about it, but I think it was 2 weeks ago at this point, or last week, in Atlanta, there was a mass shooting at 3 different massage parlors, and 6 of the 8 victims were Korean or Asian women. I think most of them were Korean, but just Asian women in general. And um, a lot of the media has not been describing it as a hate crime, but I would just like to say that right now it is definitely a hate crime. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about like how we reacted to it and like just address some other things that we've noticed. So how did you feel when you heard about the shooting?
Well, I honestly was just like sad that that happens. Like, we had been hearing about other hate crimes, like with elderly people being pushed down and just like terrible things like that. And those I believe most of those were non-fatal. So the fact that in this one incident 6 Asian women were killed was very devastating, I think, and really shocking to me. Also, like, just the way that people are perceiving it, also the fact that people are like, oh, but they don't know if it's a hate crime, and I'm like, it's clearly some, like, there's racial undertones here, clearly, and misogynistic undertones. So I think people who are ignoring that are really either ignorant or they're just trying to ignore what they don't want to address. And so I think that was really upsetting to me as well. And also the fact that that one sheriff said, oh, he was having a bad day. That just really made me angry, honestly. And I bet that made a lot of people angry because, when you have a bad day, you don't go and kill 8 people. So that's kind of what I felt when I first heard about that.
Yeah, I think it was a little pretty similar for me. I think it happened like in I think like the evening or something, so I didn't really read up on it until the next morning, but like I just remember opening the news and that was like the top article and I was like, "Wait, what? Like what happened?" And then like as I started reading it, I was like, "Oh my God, like thinking about how the women who were killed were like literally like my mom's age or like young mothers. I don't know, like something about that it like it seems so much more devastating than like obviously you don't want it to get shot and killed, but just the fact that like that could have happened to my mom or like someone that I knew. I think that made a much bigger impact on me and like obviously it's um not okay that it happened, but the fact that like people are just gonna brush it off probably or like not take it as seriously because it wasn't specifically described as a hate crime is just also making me really angry. Like in the article it was saying like, oh, like the killer did it because he had like a sex addiction and these women were like tempting him or something, but like first of all that's not an excuse for murdering someone, and second of all like that just speaks to how like Asian women are fetishized, like we were talking about in our other episode, but just like how he just automatically viewed them as objects of like his desire and he couldn't picture them as anything else when they're literally just like working women and mothers and like I don't know. Yeah, that was just really like disgusting to hear about, honestly.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way, especially like you said, we talked about it. We had talked about it before, like many times, and like even in our other episode, we talked about fetishizing Asian women, and this is like a clear example of that. And I had never had like such a tangible like image of what that looks like until now. And I don't think other people really understand like how Asian women really are fetishized. And now I think people might realize it more because this happened, which is unfortunate, of course, that it happened. But hopefully, people will be able to see from it like what we're talking about and how that actually is a big problem with everything that Asian Americans experience. Like, Asian women just should not have to go through that. And also the fact that he was like, I was tempted by them, and that whole thing just angers me, like, not even just as an Asian woman, but just as a woman in general. Like, we are not objects, like you said, we are not objects to be desired. And the fact that you can't control yourself enough and you have to then take it out on them, like, that is not their fault. That is terrible, and it's honestly something a lot of women experience. Like, there's violence against women just because, they're seen as objects, and I think that that's another, um, key takeaway from all of this is that that's a major issue as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I was like looking on Twitter like the days after it happened, and a lot of people were talking about how the intersection of like race and class also plays a part into this. And I definitely agree because like you don't think about like when we talk about Asian Americans, most people think that they're all like upper middle class or like really well off or really successful, which is part of the model minority myth. But then that just means that no one is thinking about maybe the lower class Asian Americans who are still in this country and like they're everywhere and they just are not part of this monolith of how we view Asian Americans in general. So like the fact that they like these sort of lower class workers were the ones being attacked, um, it just kind of brings a different like perspective to what's going on.
Yeah, and I like what you said about like the intersection of class and race. And in Eugene's documentary, one of the Try Guys, they made a documentary and it's actually really informational. We're gonna get a little bit more into that, but they did share a statistic that was something like Asians make up both the poorest and the wealthiest members of American society. So, like you said, like the model minority myth, just like you assume that Asian people are going to be on the wealthier half, but we're actually like the biggest range.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the documentary, I highly recommend. It's only an hour long. And I also like learned a lot about it because um growing up in America, like you don't really learn a lot about Asian American history just in general. And watching the documentary was one of the first times I actually knew more than just like I knew like a lot of Chinese people helped build like railroads in the West. And I knew about like Japanese internment camps, but I didn't know about like, for example, the Vincent Chin story. So like hearing that basically, if you guys don't know, he was I think he was a Chinese man and he was at this bar one day. Um, and then these two white guys who worked for like a car manufacturing plant or something like that, they thought that he was either Japanese or Korean, I don't remember, but like either way, they didn't know that he was just a random East Asian guy, and then they were trying to blame him for like people taking their jobs and whatever. So basically dragged him outside and beat him up, I think was what happened. It was covered really well in the documentary, so just watch that or look it up if you want to know the entire story. But the fact that like they didn't actually care, they just saw what he looked like and they killed him with a bat, like by beating him up. And that was like one of the first times when Asian Americans tried to, I guess, stand up for themselves. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I thought that was like interesting too because I hadn't heard about that or like learned about that in any of my history classes. And I feel like that was like as it was portrayed in the documentary and like from the facts and the pictures that they showed about it, like it seems like it was a very important movement. And the fact that we haven't learned about it in school was really shocking to me. And it just goes to show like there is a lack of education about Asian history and Asian American history. And I think that we need to fix that honestly in our education system. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, but I think it's necessary. And I also didn't know about like all of the interaction between like the Black civil rights movement and like Asian solidarity with like the Black community. Like I didn't know about any of that either from like any of my history classes. So I think that that's really important to learn as well. And I like that in that documentary he makes a big focus about like bringing different communities together to fight oppression and white supremacy and things like that because I think that's really important, like especially during this time with Black Lives Matter and like anti-Asian hate happening now. Like it's really important, to stand in solidarity with these other groups. So
Yeah, I I never knew that like part of the reason why like Asian Americans had the rights that they do is because of the Black community, but it makes sense that they would be the ones supporting because like the Black community, the African Americans, they've always been, such a powerful force in this country. And I don't think they could have done it without support from other people as well. So that totally makes sense as to like working together. And then, but like also, I feel like nowadays, um, a lot of Asian people are still very openly anti-Black or the other way around. And it's not like we mean to be like exclusive of other people, but I think just because there will be racist people in every community, like people will find that as an excuse to not want to work with the entire community, which is just sort of going against the purpose of trying to take down white supremacy in general. Like they want us to be divided. Like nothing is going to ever get done if we're not willing to work with people who don't look like us. And so like even if you had a bad experience with someone who is racist to you before and they just happen to not be white, like that doesn't mean that we're not going to support them because like them as a whole, because ultimately the goal is not to like cause further division, but we just need to get to the root of the problem, white supremacy, which is like literally the reason why we're even divided in the first place.
yeah, definitely. Like if we constantly are trying to fight one another, like that's not going to solve anything. And I liked how in the documentary someone said like, what was it? As long as you're not on the bottom, it's okay. And I think we need to stop like trying to fight amongst ourselves to not be on the bottom, and like we need to just fight together for equality, honestly, which is way easier said than done. Like you said, like there's going to be racism within each community. So like we all need to do our part as individuals to, speak with those in our own communities about um, like racism against other people and just make sure that like we're not adding to that and that we're being a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. So, yeah, I really liked that point that they made.
Yeah. And like similarly, I think part of the documentary was Eugene talking about generational divide, and I've actually found that to be really true. Like last year, I tried to talk to my parents about the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that, and I mean, they're supportive, obviously, of Black people, but they were saying like they didn't understand how like it was systemic, like the racism was systemic, because in their eyes, people are treated equally in America. And it was just really hard for me to explain how, like, even if individually we're not being prejudiced against people, like, all of the structures around us are still built up in a way where, like, Black people are not able to succeed. And it's not like we're trying to, well, like, not like my personal self is trying to be racist, but the fact that I live in a racist society is one of the reasons that I can't do anything about it. But they were just saying like, oh, because I'm an immigrant and I made it here, it must be the fact that it must be true that like anyone can make it here. And it was just really difficult for me to explain like that's not necessarily the case. And there's definitely people who come here and they don't make it. And like the situation that we are in is not gonna be necessarily the same as every single person's situation. I don't know, have you experienced like generational divides and thinking like that?
Yeah, I think I definitely have. Like, my parents are definitely, they don't understand it like as much as we would. I think just like our generation in general is very different, in that I feel like we have so many activists in our generation, which is so amazing. Um, but our parents' generation isn't like that. And I don't know, like, not in the fact that they're not activists. Like, of course, they were activists for like whatever movements were happening back then, but like, I don't know, it's just so different because I don't even know how to explain it, but like what you were saying with all of the like systemic racism, I think it's important to point out like it's not necessarily that they're not being treated different. Like, I feel like most people are treated like with a basic level of respect in America, like usually, of course, with the exception of like certain hate crimes, which is obvious. But it's just those systemic things that have been in place since like before we were even here that continue to have an effect. And it's important to realize, like, even though you may not be racist yourself or like starting racist institutions or anything like that, like the effect of the past is still continuing on. And so we need to actively change that in order to make a difference. And I think that's something that um the generation before us doesn't quite understand, because they're like, well, back in my day, like it was a lot worse or blah blah blah, and they've come so far. And I'm like, okay, but there's still a lot of work that we actively need to do now in order to continue to break down barriers.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't exactly, it's not like a perfect relationship to anti-Asian hate, but like just having like more conversations with them, I think would help in the future, as long as I have, all the facts prepared and everything. Because I mean, at the bottom, or like generally, I think we're on the same line or the same page. And like, no one is trying to be like racist or a terrible person, but there are always going to be things that we have to unlearn. And like, if we're putting in the effort, then like, I think it's better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like you said, we're just born into a society that was based off of racism. There's certain things that are just ingrained so deeply in us that we have to like actively work against it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you wanted to talk about more of the documentary, but I just wanted to share some statistics from the Stop AAPI Hate National Report. So this was done between March 19th of last year and February 28th of this year. And it said that in 2020, there were over 3,000 incidents of hate crimes slash, I guess, attacks. And one of the trends that I noticed was that women report hate incidents 2.3 times more than men, which kind of relates to how, like, gender plays a role, but then also race does. And then, like, we were talking about how a lot of elders were being attacked as well, but they might not even report it a lot of the times, which just makes me think of like my own grandparents. Like, they don't live here obviously, but if they did, like, and that happened to them, like, would I even have known, or like would anything have even happened, or would the perpetrators have been arrested at all, and I think about how in my neighborhood, like, there's like a Chinese family who lives a few houses away, and their grandparents do live here. So I just can't imagine like what they must have been feeling over these past few months when they heard about these incidents in the news, or like just like all these random but not random attacks on elderly people who can't even defend themselves, and it's always based on their race. Like, it doesn't, I don't know, it just makes me really sort of upset and fearful also.
Yeah, I think it's just really sad. Like, I don't know. My family, we have this big group message that's like my aunts and uncles and like everyone, my cousins, and they've been sending stuff like be safe, like don't go out unless you have to. Like, I've been seeing a lot of stuff in the news, and like even before the Atlanta shooting, they were like sending stuff like that. And I just think it's sad, like, that we have to like not go out as much, or like be more cautious when we're out now. And you know I'm always kind of cautious when I'm out just because I'm a girl, but now it's like ultra intensified. And I don't want to like have to be scared that my grandma is going to get pushed down in the street. Like, she's an old lady. Like, why would you do that? And yet that's happening. Like, why would you target old Asian people at all? Like, just helpless people, like helpless individuals. Like, why would you attack them for something that's obviously not their fault? And I don't know, like, and even against younger, like middle-aged or young Asian people, like, that's so wrong. But to like literally push down old people, what is your problem? Like, that's so messed up. And I should not have to be scared for my like 80 something year old grandma, like if she goes to the grocery store or something. But that's our reality now because people like that exist, and these tendencies and these ideologies exist against Asian people, and there's not much that I can do about it at this point except for try to educate the people around me, which, I try to do to the best of my ability, but hopefully that makes a difference enough.
Yeah, I really appreciate your Instagram post. It was like, it was just kind of like a message to your followers, like, please, like, listen to us and like be aware of what's going on, and like, and then just try to be a better person, and like be mindful of what you say, you know.
Yeah, honestly, I posted that on Instagram and Facebook, and I got like a lot of people that were like actually really nice and like really supportive. And so, I feel like not a lot of people, especially in the South, like they don't talk about anti-Asian hate at all, or like racism against Asians until now it's been spoken about. Um, I think it's partly because the Asian community has been very quiet for all this time, but also, there's a very small Asian population where I'm from, so there's not a lot of exposure. And it was just nice to see that people actually cared about it, because I know, like, I hear people talking about China virus and everything, and it was nice to see that some people were like, I support you, like, I love you, like, things like that. And it was just honestly uplifting, the responses that I got from it, and even people texting me, like, I had someone texting me, like, apologizing about something that they said. They were like, "I'm sorry if I offended you, like, that was not my intention, blah, blah," and, like, it was just nice to see that people were starting to think about the things that they say and the effect that that has on people. So, yeah. I'm glad I posted it though, because one, I got good feedback and, like, felt very supported from my community, and hopefully some people, like, learned something from it, hopefully. But that was the goal.
Yeah, I like that that person apologized. Like, hopefully that means that they understood how their words might have hurt you or something like that. So
Yeah,
hopefully they don't do it again.
yeah.
Um,
I actually had a couple people say something like that, so, like, just being like, "Hey, like, sorry if, like, I ever made a joke that was, like, rude, I didn't realize it, like, I hope that you would call me out on those things," and I don't know, it was just really nice that people are actually trying to learn.
yeah, gives me a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about. I mean, we can just kind of chat.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot of topics in our, 3rd episode. If y'all wanna go listen to that, go listen to that. We talk a lot about our own experiences as East Asian Americans, so definitely give that a listen if you have not already listened to it. But yeah, I don't know what else I have to say.
Yeah, I hope that like with people like Eugene posting about this sort of stuff on their platforms and just starting conversations with others about anti-Asian hate and how it can manifest. Like it's not always going to be like a direct attack, obviously. It could just be like a microaggression, like someone like thinking my food smells bad or like, you know, which is still gonna like it's still gonna hurt you. But I feel like a lot of people aren't even aware that those things bother us. So hopefully, like as people are learning about it, um, the number of hate attacks go down. But we'll see. I don't know. Like most of the Eugene was talking about how a lot of it was due to like Trump calling it the China virus and like just spreading this sort of rhetoric everywhere. And it is honestly kind of terrifying how much social media has an impact on people's like perceptions. But then you can also use it for good. And that's what he's doing by posting this video. So I think it's really important of him or like really good of him that he posted such an important thing. And he obviously did a lot of research. So like shout out to him.
Yeah, honestly, the documentary was so, like, well put together. I was shocked. Like, there's a lot of facts and, like, a lot of history in it, and I like that because it's easy for some people to go, "Oh, but that's, like, your opinion, blah, blah," but, like, this is actually, like, based in fact for the most part, I feel like, so that's I really like that about it. And then also what you're saying with, like, the Trump's rhetoric and everything, just, like, calling it the China virus or the Kung flu. I know some people either 1, think it's a joke, or 2, they're like, "Oh, but it came from China, so, like, I'm just saying it because that's where it came from," and I'm like, even if you don't mean it with harm, it still has a harmful effect. That's like me, like, rear-ending someone with my car and being like, "Oh, but my intention wasn't bad." But the reality is I still have to live up, like, to the consequences of that. So, it's the same thing, like, your words, even if you don't mean them negatively, they can have a negative impact, and in this case, they do, as we've seen with the rise in hate crimes. So, if you continue to use words like China virus and Kung flu and everything like that, and you just excuse yourself by saying, "I don't mean it with a bad intention," I'm just going to assume that you do have a bad intention because so many people have been speaking out against rhetoric like that and saying this is harmful to us. And if you continue to use it after someone explicitly says, like, this is harming my community,
I'm going to assume that you have bad intentions. So I'm just hoping that people understand that and learn, like, it doesn't matter what your intent is. If it causes harm, you should not say it, maybe. But
Exactly. And like even if you didn't know that it was harmful, like if you're willing to accept that you did hurt someone and you actually are willing to make an effort to change, then like I mean, you can't expect to always be forgiven, but at least you'll know that you're doing the right thing. Like obviously not everyone is going to forgive you for something, but if you're looking for that instead of like looking to change, then that says something more about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like if it's more important to you, like how you appear to other people, like if you're scared of appearing racist, I think it's more important to worry about whether you are a racist, rather than if you appear as one. So, because some people are like, oh,
Exactly.
but I didn't mean to offend. And then they get insulted when you call them out on it. Cause they're like, no, I'm not a racist, because they don't want to appear racist. But I think if that's your mentality, you need to switch it to, am I a racist or am I not? Do my actions reflect that or not? And if you have done a racist thing in the past, you know, learn from it, change, move on. That's all you can do. So hopefully
Exactly.
there's a lot of change coming. I am hoping.
Yeah. I think with like the vaccine coming out, the numbers are going down. So like maybe people won't think about coronavirus that much anymore. But like as for now, I don't know if that's really gonna happen. Yeah, I don't know. Any last thoughts?
Um, Listen to the people in your communities. Listen to what they're telling you, even if you might not agree. Be open to what they're saying, and just try to make a change where you can. I think that's honestly as much as anyone can do right now.
Yeah, educate yourself. You can watch the documentary, very short, like I told you. Not short, but like it's a regular documentary one. Very informational. Um, Listen, be empathetic. Like there's really so much you can do, but like it still can make an impact. So don't, discount yourself. Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't talk much because we did already cover most of this, but um yeah, so please check that episode out, episode 3, like we said. Otherwise, um like, comment, and subscribe, rate and review. We will be making a Taylor Swift episode soon. Her album will be coming out soon. And so if you're looking forward to that, well, it'll be out around April 9th. So just be aware. Anything else to add?
No, I think that is pretty much it. But hit us up if you have any questions or anything like that. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.